5 reading mistakes that you need to avoid. The 5 mistakes that I made in my reading journey. That's what we are going to be covering in today's video. Let's get started. Hey folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Praveen Ramesh, and on this channel we speak about non-fiction books, and I also speak about lessons that I'm personally learning by reading these books. I find it immensely useful. I hope you do too. In today's video, as I said at the start, we're going to be speaking about the mistakes that I made, or probably the ones that you could avoid in your reading journey, right? So before I get started, I want to give a bit of history about, how I started reading and all those things. I've been a very sporadic reader from my childhood, right? There were these phases where I would read like a lot, and then there would be years, like 5-6 years where I wouldn't read, and then there would be this phase of 2 or 3 years where I started reading, and then there would be like 5 or 6 years where I wouldn't read and things like that. Touch wood, for the past 2 or 3 years I've been reading fairly more consistently than ever before in my life, right? And this fine Saturday morning I woke up and I was thinking, okay, what should be the topic of my next video? And I thought, okay, why don't I speak about the mistakes that I have made all through my reading journey? So I did some memory jogging to my childhood and things like that, and this video is a result of that. So, before going any further with these stories, so the mistake number 1 is, not reading for fun, right? So that's the first mistake that I made, right? So what do I mean by that, right? So I think not reading for fun was kind of embedded in me from the childhood, right? When we were in school, or when I was in school, I was personally told to not read for fun. I rather started seeing reading as a very transactional journey. What do I mean by that, right? So here's the thing. I was always told that, hey, read this chapter and come and you probably score well in your class test. Read this book and come and it would help you in your exams and all those things, right? So for me, reading was always more about what can I get out of it, rather than thinking of it as a leisure activity, right? And as I progressed to college, I completely stopped reading, and once I joined my first job, I started reading a bit, and I got into this fictional world. I used to read a lot of fiction back in the time, and I really started enjoying the process, because I stopped seeing reading as a very transactional relationship, right? And it kind of started reflecting in how I write, how I speak, and how I see the world generally, right? So the mistake that I realized was, hey, if I was reading for fun, I was able to make far better connections between things. I was able to view the world in a different way, and without my knowledge, it was adding a lot of intangible benefits, right? So that's the mistake that I would want you to avoid if you're just getting started with your reader journey. Don't see reading as a transactional relationship, and if you're doing that, you're far more likely to read widely, you're far more likely to make better connections, and probably see an intangible improvement without your knowledge. So that's the mistake number 1. Going to mistake number 2, reading too much in the zone. So what do I mean by that? In case you are kind of blinded by the the overlay, I called it the zone. So what do I mean by that? So the second point is a continuation of the first one. So here's the thing, right? So for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been constantly reading a lot of these non-fiction books, especially around productivity, habits, and wellness, right? So these are the broad 3 topics either I speak about, I read about, or whenever I'm interested in subscribing to a newsletter or whatever digital means that I want to read about it, I always choose these 3 niches. So what ended up happening is, all my book recommendations, all my newsletters, all my Twitter feed, and all my social media feed is filled with these 3 topics, to a level where I feel like, I'm not seeing anything new, I'm not doing anything new, or I'm seeing the same stuff again and again and again. And then I sat back and realized, oh my god, I haven't read fiction in probably 2.5-3 years now. I haven't read anything out of productivity, wellness, and habits outside of these 3 topics in the last 2 or 3 years. And I realized, oh my god, okay, there could be so much more that I could be reading about, but why am I boxing myself in? And I made this realization only a week back. So now I'm telling myself that maybe I need to explore other areas of reading. I should probably explore some more fiction and all those things. Probably don't be surprised if you see a few fiction book summaries and reviews coming up on our YouTube channel. But that's the second mistake I read, where I started reading too much in the zone. The mistake number 3 is, I think I've made a separate video on that, is not quitting enough books, right? So whenever I had a book, I think this was again a conditioning that I had from school, where I always thought if there is a book that I need to read it end to end. It was my moral responsibility, or I owed the author something so that I could complete the book end to end, right? For me, quitting the book seemed like a crime that I was doing to the author and the book, and I wasn't doing justice to the money that I spent. But what I realized is, hey, you know what, I'm wasting or forcing myself in completing books, and I quickly lose interest in reading, right? So I've spoken about how to quit books, or why do I quit more books than I read, and all those things in a separate video. I'll link it somewhere in the description or here. But that's the third mistake I did until 2 or 3 years back, where I wasn't quitting enough books. What's the fourth one? Not taking enough notes and speaking about books, right? So here's the thing. So sit back and relax, right? So when I speak about books, I feel I'm far more passionate than when I write, because you know, here's a small backstory. So what happened is, I think at least 2 or 3 years back, I bumped into this blog which spoke about a lot of non-fiction books. I was so inspired that, you know, I started taking a lot of notes. I started summarizing them in my blog, and I started writing it. And within like 2 or 3 months, I started feeling, oh my god, this is not for me. And then I started an Instagram page, again summarizing books. I deleted it and those things, right? The moment I started speaking about books on this YouTube channel with friends and, you know, with other people, my peers and everyone, I started enjoying this process more, right? So speaking about books did two things to me. So I discuss about the books that I read with, you know, a lot of people, my friends and family, and it opens up new perspectives and new thought process for me, because, you know, usually I am someone who is very confined, or I would say it's true for you as well, where you're probably confined by the small slice of the world that you see, either through that book or, you know, through your eyes or whatever. And we always think that our exposure limits the version of truth that we see. But when I discuss books with friends, they always come up with a different perspective. They take a different stand to what's discussed in the book. And I always feel that my knowledge is much more enriched when I speak about books, right? For some people, it could be posting it on social. For some people, it could be making Twitter threads. For some people, it could be writing it in a blog. But I always say, repurpose what you read. Discuss it with your friends. Write about it, or, you know, do enough things so that you can retain more information and gain more perspective into things that you love. Fifth and final one. Again, I spoke about this, I think, in my April roundup, where I focused a lot on quantity over quality, right? Because again, I think this was an effect of social media, that I kept seeing people who said, I read 1,000 books this year, I read 400 books, I read 50 books, 60 books and all those things. And I was like, okay, I'm always lagging behind. I always felt like, okay, reading is a kind of a race that I was having with someone across the globe. And I realized, oh my god, okay, you know what, if I'm not enjoying reading for whatever reason, because of the mind space I'm in, because of the work that I have, because of my schedule or whatever reason, I shouldn't beat myself up over it. Because to be very honest, I've had months where I've completed 5-6 books in one go, and I've had months where I struggle to complete through one book, right? And it's perfectly okay. And I started telling myself that, hey, I'm not in a race with anyone. I rather focus and reread things that I really enjoyed, rather than always trying to go for a new book and increasing that total book count number. So these are the 5 mistakes that I made. Just to kind of quickly summarize: not reading for fun. I saw reading as a very transactional relationship. Reading too much into the zone, where if I enjoy 1 or 2 particular topics, I read too much into it, not exploring outside of that zone. Not quitting enough books, forcing myself to complete books just because I've spent some money to get it. Not taking or taking notes or speaking enough about books. Speaking about books, or, you know, putting it out there to the world, opens up a lot of your perspectives. Focusing on quantity rather than quality, because you're not in a race with anyone, you're just in a race with yourself. I hope my mistake, some of these mistakes resonate with you. Probably you could be doing some, or probably you aren't doing any. So if you're doing any of these mistakes, I just want to let you know that you're not alone. I'm someone who's doing it, and I'm someone who's constantly trying to overcome that. If you're doing any other mistakes, or if some of these did strike a chord with you, do let me know what you think about these in the comment section. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. This is Praveen Ramesh signing off.